watching this video, it's probably because the question, can I give you feedback, immediately makes you break out in sweat. It makes you a little nauseous, maybe like makes you tighten up in some places. And it might be because you might be on the receiving end of what I call feedback fuckery. And this is anything that people may package as feedback, but isn't actually feedback. And so today we're going to talk through what are the different types. There are 5 types that I've seen in my time working with a variety of folks and just being a working person that I've heard that I can categorize into 5 different types of feedback fuckery. We're going to talk about why this is particularly difficult, unpleasant, oppressive for those of us that are marginalized or racialized folks, and how we can avoid kind of making some of those common mistakes and in being really thoughtful and intentional around when we want to say that we want to give people feedback that is actual feedback. And if at any point you have any questions, please feel free to put that in the comments or in the chat below. If you don't know who I am yet, my name is Petra Vega, and I'm an anti-oppressive leadership coach for BIPOC and LGBTQ nonprofit leaders who really want to be able to speak up in the moment. They want to speak up in those meetings, but maybe self-doubt is kind of getting in the way and it's stopping them from doing that. The thing I'm most interested in is really helping these folks reclaim their voice as a source of power that it is, and I kind of guide them through confidently expressing themselves and being able to spark that meaningful change in their workplace. So if that sounds like you, you're in the right place. Well, I plan to give you as much as I can on this topic so you know what to avoid, or even if you've been the victim of some of this feedback fuckery, that you know that it's not your fault and it wasn't called for. But I want to make sure that I offer the most, the best place that you could go to hear all of my thoughts and to get all of my experience, my 10+ experience in doing this work, is through my Feel Good Feedback Guide. I'm going to put that in the chat. And then if you are watching the recording of this video, you can access this Feel Good Feedback Guide in the description box below. So feel free to get that. It's free. She is really robust. I did my best to try to offer everything that I know about trying to give feedback in a way that feels good for the person receiving the feedback and for the person who is giving the feedback. I go into like what feedback is and what feedback isn't so that you can be clear around what it is that you're giving or what it is that you're getting. I share lots of examples and questions that you can use as you're having conversations with folks that you supervise, with your colleagues, around how they would like feedback to be given. I share different scenarios and like the best case scenario around what you can do so that the feedback that you give is actually implemented by the person who's receiving it. And then I go into some things around feedback fuckery so that you know what to avoid and you can steer clear from those things. Again, it's a free resource. It is in the chat. It's called the Feel Good Feedback Guide. And I highly suggest that you grab that if you really want to get if you want like a one-stop around all of your feedback giving needs, check that in there. And then the last thing that I want to note before we get into today is that if you are here watching with me live, I want to offer that I'm doing a little contest. If you stay until the end of this live, I'm offering one of 2 things that you can win for free. Either a free workshop series that is really going to help you develop your anti-oppressive and liberatory analysis so that you can really make sure that you're bringing that lens into the work that you're doing. Again, it's a 3-part series. It's called So You Want to Be Less Oppressive. Or you can get one free one-to-one coaching call with me, which I call a spark session. So you and I can just jam for an hour on anything leadership related that you want support on, and then we can try to create that spark for you. So that's that on that. Let's get into these categories. So one of the buckets that I see when people want to give constructive criticism, constructive feedback, hard to hear feedback, one of the buckets that people fall into is commentary around your appearance, right? And so examples of this might be, someone might be telling you, oh, maybe your facial expressions are adversarial, right? I'm thinking about the trend that we had a few years ago around like resting bitch face. Like this is the workplace remix of how to say that. It's like, oh, your facial expressions are, insert antagonistic adjective here. Or it might look something like, it doesn't look like you did your hair today, right? Which is, we don't get into why that's a problem. Or another one, just to make sure that you get a sense of like what kind of commentary around appearance I'm talking about. This last example, it just happened a few weeks ago actually with my colleague. Someone else had told her, you look like how I feel, to indicate that this person looked busted. Like this person felt tired and busted, and it's like, you look like how I feel. And so let's get into why that's fucked up. Okay. So the first one is that all of these are unsolicited, right? Like all of these people in the examples I'm thinking about, like people just like woke up, came into the office, and someone's just like running their mouth about this, that, and the third. These are likely problematic or oppressive depending on the identities in which these people are in, particularly around hair. There's a lot of stigma around Black and brown hair. And so for you to make comments, there are comments about appearance. There's a lot of people that feel self-conscious about their facial expressions, that there might be some racial undertones at the organization. It's like, this is just my face, right? But the way that you perceive me because of some other things, you think it's okay to make that kind of comment towards me. And the last one that the reason this is fucked up is like, it's likely controlling and critical, right? You're like, what do you want? Why do I have to shift my face? Like probably whatever I'm saying is a value, is like a point that I'm trying to make it across, but you're so focused on what I look like and what my face is doing that you can't even hear me. And I think we are, particularly for those of us that are on the margins, we're often told like we need to contort in these ways, and I reject all of that. I don't think that we should expect that of each other. I don't think we should expect that of anyone. So that's the first category around like feedback fuckery, commentary about your appearance. Let's not do that. The second category that I've seen, I describe as commentary that's given via a third party, right? And so examples from this one is someone might tell you, oh, be careful what you say to people because people are talking badly about you, right? Like it's like that person isn't talking badly about you, but they're telling you that someone else is. So it's that third party. You're getting some comment around like, be careful because people are watching you, or people are paying attention to what you're doing or not doing. Another one example of this one might be, Madeline, again, this other person, said that you're really dropping ball on this project, right? And maybe it's Shakira that's saying this to another person. You're like, Madeline said that you're dropping the ball on this project. Why is this fucked up, right? So one, it really creates this environment of policing, right? It creates this air of like, there's someone like leering and watching, and we don't know at any moment, like someone could be picking up and using what you're saying, and like it's very deceitful and manipulative, and I don't want to create that kind of environment, and I don't know that you want to create this kind of environment as someone who cares about the people that you work with and cares about the organization, the work that you're doing. But that kind of commentary under the guise of feedback creates that environment of policing, right, where it puts people on edge. The other problem with this is that it really makes the if there's already a culture of being afraid of conflict or avoiding conflict, this kind of commentary exacerbates that kind of stuff, right? Because it says that we're not able to be direct with one another. It says that we can't be honest with one another. And probably before it got to this third person saying something on the side of their face to someone else, and then it got to the wrong person, probably they could have had a conversation around like, okay, how am I dropping the ball on this project? Like that sounds like there hasn't been some clear actual feedback that hasn't been given around expectations, around, level setting, around checking in. And then this piece around like, people are talking about what you have to say. I was like, what am I saying? Am I challenging the status quo? Then like, yeah, it makes sense to be talking about that, because often organizations don't want that, right? But what if I'm saying has validity, and now you just strike the fear into me that now I'm like, oh my God, people are watching me. I need to be careful with my job. Again, and all of this is happening under the like, I'm trying to help you out. This is feedback. That's not feedback, right? So that's category 2 around commentary given by a third party. It really should be between those two people. The third category of feedback that I've seen really surrounds attacking someone's character or worthiness. And the way that I've heard this one sound is something to the effect of like, you can't do anything right? Like it comes out very exasperated. Probably this person is at their wit's end with this other person, and they're like, oh my God, I just can't do anything right, which is kind of like a very like quick and nasty thing to say. Another way that I've seen it happen is that maybe someone might say, what's wrong with you? Why haven't you figured this thing out then? Yes, and again, it's coming from like exasperated, probably the stress is really high. There might be a sense of urgency, deadlines and such. And so like, people may, again, under the guise of feedback, people are giving this like really harsh character worthiness, attacky kind of thing. And so let's talk about why that's fucked up. So not only is it just like hurtful, but we want to think, if those of you who are giving feedback or receiving feedback, you may want to think about how feedback can be traumatizing for people if this isn't a thought that you've had before. And so my feel good feedback guide takes that into consideration, that feedback is often traumatizing for people, which is why I try to do so diligently around like experimenting with how can I give feedback in a way that people can hear it, because people have had such bad experiences. And so saying something like you can't do anything right is probably re-traumatizing for people. The world is not kind. And so I can just imagine if I am just sharing even more unkindness in that kind of way, that probably the receiver has already gotten that kind of feedback. And I don't want to be part of this cycle that affirms that this person is like disposable or unworthy or can't do anything right. Like that is a hard, if that is how that person feels, that's a hard core to swallow as a person. And I just don't think that you want to perpetuate that. The other piece is that, again, with my approach to feedback, is that we really want it to be generative. We want it to be something that grows. Like this is something supposed to like water someone's intentions in the ways in which they want to grow. But this isn't this kind of commentary that attacks your character, your worthiness. It's not generative at all, right? Like what do you expect someone to do with you can't do anything right and frustratingly saying you haven't figured this out? What's wrong with you, right? And again, there might be I named some of those like context conditions around like stress and deadlines, and maybe you have tried different ways with this person, but that is just like not the way that's going to work, right? Like I really just have not seen that to be effective. And at worst, it's probably re-traumatizing. And so those are my first three buckets of feedback fuckery. I want to kind of pause here and ask you all, like, have you heard people giving feedback in this kind of way? Is this still as common as it is in the circles that I am in? And also feel free to pop any questions or thoughts that you have about what I've shared so far. Okay, let's keep going. So feedback fuckery category number 4 is any commentary that's meant to punish, right? And so oftentimes people might want to say that this is feedback, but again, I think this is commentary that's meant to punish. And here are 2 examples that I can think of so that you can get a sense of whether or not you've experienced this or you might be doing this to someone else. So the first one might be something like, oh, 6 months ago, you didn't email that partner in a timely manner, and so now you're not getting your raise. And let's say this is something that's shared during annual evaluation. That is commentary that's meant to punish, right? That person didn't do what they needed to do. And it sounds like to me, based on the commentary, that was not communicated to them. And now you've been holding on to it for 6 months during this big, huge annual evaluation to punish this person. Honestly, you might want to say this to hold them accountable, but really feels like punishment. Another way that I've heard this be shared is you might say something like, this is often like very common in relationships as well, that you might say, or someone might say to you, I've been mad at you for months and now I don't want you to come to this conference with me. Again, the withholding, and now at the opportune time that, you really need this person or something has to be communicated, you're withholding that information, and then you're blowing up on them. So there's a number of reasons why I find this particularly fucked up. So one, I think this really reinforces paternalism. And the way in which this is manifested in paternalism is that those with power and control, whether it be through their privileged identities or whether it be through their positional roles at their organizations, they can really control decisions that get made, right? Like whether or not you get a raise, whether or not you get to go to the conference, whether or not you get access to these opportunities. And they really use that influence unethically, right? Like I would call those really unethical ways in which to swing around and sword your power. I think this also really reinforces perfectionism around, mistakes, right? Like if someone didn't send an email, like that could be a mistake potentially depending on the context. or we don't even know why this person is mad for months, but potentially those things were seen as mistakes or potential failures, or like missteps, but this is really seen as like, oh, you are a bad person, right? For this mistake, this failure, you're a bad person. It really gets to like people's morality, like, oh my God, you're the worst thing ever, and I don't want to be with you at this conference, or you're the worst thing ever, and I don't want you to get this little $10 raise. Because the raise ain't even that much. But even so, people want to play with that. And so that kind of gets into the next bit around, like, I am really not a fan of playing with people's livelihoods. Like, I think we really need to communicate effectively and give actual feedback if we think that people are doing something that could put them into jeopardy around their raises, around their promotions. Like, those things should not be played with. And this category of feedback is really fucking around with that. That's not cute. I think the other piece, too, that makes this one particularly prickly is that likely the thing, whatever the thing that didn't happen that now this person is withholding, could have been addressed in a timely manner. I talk about with the Feel Good Feedback Guide, my approach is really that it's consent-based, right? And so maybe we're not giving consent when the person who wants to give consent is going to give it, but we check in later on, right? Like, okay, I give this feedback in a few days? Can I give it in a week? We're not waiting 6 months to give this feedback. That is wild banana hands. I think the other piece that makes this one no bueno is that for just the giver, the person that's like offering what they think is feedback to this person, is that grudges are not fun, right? Like, I don't run on grudges and just hate for months like that. I am fueled with food, right? But if I don't think that you are fueled that way either, and just like in all parties, in all ways that I could look at this one just doesn't work for anyone. So that's my category number 4. And then for the last category, most of these is really focusing on the ways in which the feedback giver is not really doing what they need to do. This last one is really about the feedback receiver, right? That those of us that are receiving this feedback, we got some work to do too. And so this one I describe is when the feedback receiver isn't actually open to the feedback, but then still consents to receiving the feedback, right? And then what happens as a result of that. And so I just mentioned earlier that my approach is really consent-based. And so let's say that I want to give you some feedback, and it is, Friday, 10 p.m., would not give you feedback, Friday, 10 a.m., and you're like, now's not really a good time. Like, could we do this on Monday? Then I'd be like, yeah, totally. Let's do the feedback on Monday. But then let's say that in a different scenario, I'm like, oh, can I give you some feedback? And you were like stressed out about this meeting this morning. Maybe you've had a really fucked up week. Maybe you don't have the energy or the spoons to really process it. And still you're like, yeah, Petra, it's cool. Let me get the feedback. You should have said no. You should have said no, and we should have waited till Monday, clear your head, wait for the weekend, do what you need to do to get the feedback. But you said yes. And so now I'm giving you the feedback, and now you're like, oh, I'm disheveled. I don't know what to do. And so really the invitation here for the person who has to say yes or no to the feedback of someone is so gracious enough to ask for your consent before they give it, is that you really have to tune in, feedback receiver. You have to tune in, you have to pause, you have to turn in when you have to be like, okay, am I really in a place to really hear this person? Like, if they say something hard, like, can I be able to handle it? Do I want to take that into the weekend? Like, what are my options here? And for the person giving the feedback, I want you to be like extra noticing around, okay, is the person really saying yes? Are they feeling the power struggle? Am I using my influence in too strong, and people maybe they want to say no, but they don't feel good about saying no? We're really looking for that enthusiastic yes, right? I can be like, oh yeah, totally. What you have to say? If there's any hesitation, I really want you to notice it, to tune into that as much as you can, right? And I just want to offer that this one is really hard, particularly for those of us that maybe have had to grow up and not fully express our emotions. This is going to be hard for you if you're someone who's had to mask, whether maybe you're neurodivergent or you feel like your full of self has not been welcome in the workplace. This one is going to be an area of growth for you. I just want to name that, but that this is also a piece of like one of the ways that feedback can go awry is when we're actually not in a place to listen and receive that feedback. And I don't want that for you. So those are my 5 categories of feedback fuckery, the biggest, worst ways that people try to give feedback and don't do that very well. So again, I want to plug my Feel Good Feedback guide. I go into these examples. You can have them to take with you as you're practicing giving feedback out in the world, that you have something that can be as a reference, so you can kind of, you like, you can make sure to not go into those territories. And also, if you have any questions, you'll have the opportunity to be added to my email list when you sign up for the guide. So you can feel free to ask me questions, or even in the comments here, you can ask me questions. But yeah, I hope now you know what not to do.